Montana Territory, June 1883. The church bell rang once sharp and hollow, then fell silent. Odessa Renley did not wait for the second chime. She kicked open the side door of the white-clapboard church, bare feet slapping against the packed dirt, her wedding dress torn at the hem and streaked with dust. A corset string snapped loose behind her as she ran, her breath catching in her throat. The morning sun caught in her hair, and the wind tore at her veil until it vanished somewhere behind her, forgotten like the man waiting at the altar. She ran past the horses tied out front, past rows of townsfolk still settling in for the ceremony, and into the hills that rolled beyond the churchyard. No one yelled after her, not yet. But they would. Her father would curse. Judge Wyndon, her would-be groom, would fume. And the town of Stillwater would whisper about the sheriff's daughter who ran off in her wedding dress. Odessa did not care. She had spent months trying to believe she could marry a man old enough to be her father, a man with law and land and cold hands who never listened when she said no. She had nodded and smiled and tried to be the girl everyone wanted. But at the edge of that aisle, something inside her snapped. So she ran. The hills beyond Stillwater were dry and wide, the grass gold and high. Odessa's lungs burned. Her dress snagged on brush and barbed wire as she climbed higher, away from the town and everything that kept her small. When she finally stumbled, it was not from exhaustion but from tripping over a root near the fence line of a cattle pasture. A man on horseback pulled up fast, reins tight in his hand, a rifle strapped to his saddle. His horse pawed the dirt and the man's eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his hat. "You all right?" he asked. His voice was low, steady. Odessa scrambled to her feet, dress ripped near the knee, dust streaking her pale blue skirts. She looked up at him, chest heaving. "Do I look all right to you?" she shot back. The man blinked once, then swung down from the saddle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair that curled a little at the nape. He wore a trail-worn shirt rolled at the sleeves, and his boots were scuffed from long days riding. "Fair enough," he said. "You get thrown from a buggy or something?" "I ran," she said. He looked her over once more. "From what?" Odessa hesitated. Then she lifted her chin. "My wedding." He raised both brows. "That right. I am not going back," she said. "So if you plan to turn me in—" "I do not," he said simply. "I was just heading for my cabin. It's about a mile west. You can catch your breath there if you want." Odessa's legs ached, and her throat was dry, but she did not move. "I do not know you," she said. "Name's Dempsey Jarrett," he said. "I run cattle here. That's my brand on the post." She looked down at the fence. Burned into the wood was a simple J with a hook curling from the bottom. She looked back at him. "I am Odessa," she said. "Odessa Renley." "I will walk," he said. "You take the horse." She stared at him. "You do not even know me." "I know enough." "You ran in a torn dress," he said. "That tells me plenty." She did not know why, but she believed him. Dempsey helped her into the saddle, then led the horse through the pasture, the sun rising higher behind them. She felt the warmth of it on her neck as they walked in silence, the wind tugging at the ruined lace of her gown. His cabin sat in a small hollow near a creek tucked between cottonwoods. The air smelled like pine and old smoke. It was small, a single room, wood-framed and sturdy but clean. A hammock hung under the porch. A kettle sat cooling near the fire pit outside. Dempsey tied the horse, then opened the door for her. "Stay as long as you need," he said. Odessa stepped inside. The wood floor creaked under her feet. A cot sat against the wall with folded quilts. There was a shelf with tins and a row of books. She reached up and touched one, an old copy of Moby Dick. "You read?" she asked. "When there is time." She turned to face him. "Why are you helping me?" He tilted his head. "Why did you run from your wedding?" She did not answer. Not right away. Instead, she moved to the basin and poured water into a bowl, splashing her face, wiping the dirt from her cheeks. Her reflection in the metal stared back, wild-eyed, torn-dressed, free. "I was not in love with him," she said finally. "And he did not care." Dempsey nodded once. "I will bring you food," he said. "You will be safe here." That night, Dempsey cooked beans and cornbread over the fire, while Odessa sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around her. She had changed into one of his shirts, too big across the shoulders, rolled at the sleeves. "I will need to leave soon," she said. "Find work. Make my own way. You can stay as long as you want." Odessa looked at him, her expression softer now. "You are kind," she said. He met her gaze, quiet for a long beat. "You are strong," he said back. Something shifted between them. Not sudden, not loud, but steady like the slow turning of a river. The next days passed quiet. Dempsey taught her how to chop wood, how to clean fish from the creek. He never asked about the wedding again. Odessa never offered more. But when their hands brushed while passing the coffee tin, neither pulled away. One afternoon, she found a pair of old jeans he had left by the cot and pulled them on, rolling the cuffs. She stepped outside, hands on her hips. Dempsey looked up from where he was fixing a fence post. "They fit," he said. "Not well," she replied, but she smiled. He smiled back. That night, as the fire burned low, Odessa sat beside him on the porch bench. "I feel like I can breathe out here," she said. "You were meant for wide spaces," he said. She turned toward him. "You do not ask for anything. You never even ask why I came here, really. You ran," he said. "That is enough. You are the first man who ever saw me as more than a name or a body." Dempsey's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Odessa reached out and took his hand. "I do not want to leave." His eyes lifted to hers, then steady, warm. "Then stay." She nodded and leaned into him. His arm came around her shoulders, strong and sure. They sat there long after the fire died, the sky full of stars, the world gone quiet. Neither said the word love, but they both felt it growing deep and certain, as sure as the wind through the trees. The morning after the frost settled on the creek stones, Dempsey found Odessa kneeling by the garden bed behind the cabin, sleeves pushed up, fingers in the dirt. She'd taken to tending the patch of parsnip and early beans like she'd been doing it her whole life, though it was clear she hadn't. The rows were crooked, her palms blotted with bruises where she'd gripped stones too hard. But she kept at it without complaint. "You don't need to work that hard," he said, stepping around the washed blanket line. Odessa didn't glance up. "I need to know I'm useful here." "You already are." She sat back on her heels, brushing soil from her wrists. "I spent so long being ornamental, I near forgot how to be real. I want every part of this life to mean something, even the parts that blister." Dempsey leaned against the post that marked the edge of the garden. "You could have gone anywhere." "Why here?" She stood, brushing her knees. "Because nobody in Stillwater would have believed I could disappear without a trace. And because you didn't ask anything of me. That won't always be true." She steadied him with her eyes. "I hope not." Later, she stitched a tear in one of his shirts while he fed the fire. The air inside the cabin held the scent of dry sage and last night's ash. A new kettle boiled, the steam curling like breath. "I saw a man once," she said without looking up, "get dragged behind his own wagon for refusing to hand his daughter over to a banker's son." She was 12. Dempsey let the silence rest for a breath. "Where was this?" "South of Bismarck. My father had business there." I watched from the hotel window while the girl screamed. He didn't ask what kind of business. He only said, "That's not a story a person forgets." Odessa tied off her stitch. "I think I stopped believing in safety after that. Until now." The light changed by late afternoon. Wind carried the scent of rain, and the sky took on the green-blue weight of a coming storm. Dempsey tied the animals under the lean-to while Odessa gathered the stacked linens from the porch rail. She moved quickly, barefoot again, mud slipping between her toes. Thunder cracked once, distant but deep. "You ever been caught in a lightning storm?" he asked as she ducked under the porch roof. "I was struck once," she said plainly. He turned to her, eyes searching. "Not by lightning," she clarified. "By a man's hand. The kind of strike that leaves you different afterward." Dempsey didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, "You don't flinch when I touch your hand. You don't reach for it unless I offer it," she said. Rain began in earnest then, drumming on the roof, flattening the grass beyond the yard into slick, shining rows. Mud filled the wagon tracks. Dempsey lit the lantern and Odessa watched the flame catch. "You were a boy during the war?" she asked. "Turned 13 the spring Vicksburg fell. My old man left with a Missouri regiment. Never came back. She studied his face. Is that why you live alone? I trust the land more than most men. But not more than me. His eyes didn't waver. No, that night. The storm drove the creek high. Water spilled over the bank, and the path to the cabin turned to muck. They lay on the cot together, not touching, but close enough she could hear the way his breath slowed when sleep started to take him. She didn't sleep. Dempsey, she whispered. If I stay, I want to help with the cattle. I want to learn every part of it. He turned his head toward her voice. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Outside, the wind calmed. The rain softened. Inside, she reached for his hand in the dark and found it already open, waiting. She didn't speak again that night. She didn't need to. By mid-July, Odessa had learned the rhythm of the herd. She woke before the sun cleared the ridge, pulling on worn trousers and the brown work shirt Dempsey had sewn a patch onto. She moved with purpose now, tying her braid up with a strip of linen, loading the saddlebag with biscuits and jerky without needing to be asked. The high country air sharpened her, and the long rides brought a quiet steadiness to her limbs. They moved cattle through the valley past the red rock bluff, Dempsey riding 2 lengths ahead, his rifle slung across his saddle. Odessa followed, her posture straight, eyes scanning the hills like he'd shown her. You see the notch in that ridge? He asked, pointing with his chin. She nodded once. That's where the stray heifer broke off yesterday. You'll want to keep them right of the scrub. Odessa leaned into her stirrups, guiding the bay mare with a touch of her heel. You think she'll run again? Cattle do what's familiar. If she slipped once there, she'll try it again. She kept her eyes on the notch, lips pressed together in concentration. That afternoon, they ate beneath a stand of lodgepole pines, the horses tethered to a low branch. Odessa stretched her legs and bit into a biscuit, chewing slowly. Dempsey poured water into the tin cup and passed it to her. You ever think about heading east? She asked. His brow furrowed. Not in a long while. Not even to see something new? I've seen enough new to last me. What I want now is something that stays. She took the cup, meeting his gaze. So do I. The wind stirred the pine needles, and somewhere across the rise, a crow called once and fell silent. When they returned to the cabin that evening, Odessa walked the perimeter of the shed while Dempsey unsaddled the horses. She stopped near the back corner and bent low, pulling up a ragged square of canvas half buried in the earth. There's something under this, she called. He came over, wiping his hands on his trousers. Together, they lifted the covering and revealed a weathered wooden crate, banded in rusted iron. I didn't bury that, he said. Odessa knelt and brushed dirt from the lid. Could be someone did before you took this land. Dempsey pried it open with a spade. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in oilskin. She reached for it, but he stopped her. Let me. His voice was low. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a stack of letters bound with twine, and beneath them, a flintlock pistol, dulled with age. Odessa touched one letter lightly. These look older than the war. He nodded. Could be from the first settlers out here. Maybe someone hiding something they weren't ready to let go of. She looked at him. You going to read them? He stared at the bundle. Not tonight. They reburied the crate, covering it with the canvas once more. Neither spoke as they walked back to the porch, but something lingered in the air between them, an unspoken weight. The sense of lives lived before theirs in the same soil. Inside, Odessa lit the lantern while Dempsey set water to boil. She held the flame steady, her fingers careful. You ever think about children? She asked quietly. He didn't turn from the stove. Sometimes. Thought maybe once when I was younger. And now? He turned then, meeting her eyes. If I had them with you, I wouldn't fear it. She stepped closer, her voice barely a breath. I never thought I'd be anyone's mother. But I think I could be here. He reached out, his hand resting on her waist. You'd be good at it. Better than most. The kettle whistled, but neither moved. Outside, the crickets had started up in full, and the heat of the day gave way to the cool hush of approaching night. Odessa leaned in, resting her head against his chest. She listened to the steady rhythm of his heart. I didn't know a place like this existed, she said. where a person could be remade without having to forget who they were. Dempsey held her close, his voice warm against her hair. You weren't remade. You just finally had room to become. She looked up. I don't want to live anywhere else. Then you won't have to. Their lips met, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't rush to prove anything. It simply was inevitable and whole. When they parted, Odessa smiled, her eyes luminous in the lantern light. I love you, she said. He didn't answer right away. He just cupped her cheek and pressed his forehead to hers. I've loved you since you ran into my pasture with your dress torn and your chin held high. She laughed, soft and full. Outside, the moon rose over the ridge, casting silver over the creek and the hills beyond. The world around them held its breath, and for once, nothing needed to be escaped. By early August, the heat settled deep into the earth, the kind that baked the cabin walls by midday and left the horses restless in the shade. Odessa's shoulders browned under the sun and her hands roughened from rope and reins. She moved easily now between saddle and soil, unbothered by the sting of sweat or the weight of work. That morning, Dempsey returned from the southern edge of the pasture with news. Fence is down by the arroyo, he said, stepping into the cabin, dust clinging to the bend of his elbows. Looks like elk came through during the night. Odessa poured cool water into the basin from the jug near the door. Want me to ride out with you? I was hoping you would. They set out together, the mule packed with cedar posts and a coil of wire. The trail turned narrow past the gully, the brush dense and sun-bleached. Odessa rode ahead, her braid tucked beneath her hat, eyes sharp. You ever think about building a second room? She asked as their horses picked their way along the slope. I have, Dempsey said. Was waiting to see if I had someone to build it for. She didn't answer right away, just kept her gaze forward. It could face the creek, she said finally. Catch the breeze. Maybe a window over the bed. He let the silence stretch between them, not out of discomfort but out of comfort because they both knew now that their choices would shape the same future. The arroyo had collapsed in one section, the earth dry and cracked where the post had snapped. Dempsey knelt to measure the new depth while Odessa unpacked the tools. She crouched beside him, brushing loose soil from the edge. Wouldn't take much rain to wash this whole bend out, she said. No, he agreed. We'll brace it further north. Higher ground. They worked without hurry, hands moving in rhythm. Odessa held the post steady while Dempsey drove it in, sweat darkening the back of his collar. When they paused, she handed him a strip of dried peach from her pocket. You ever miss being alone? She asked. He chewed slowly, then shook his head. I was alone for years. Not once did it feel better than this. She sat back on her heels, her expression unreadable. I used to think I'd be safest if no one ever loved me again. But that wasn't safety. That was just loneliness dressed up as pride. He looked at her then, steady and open. You're not alone anymore. You won't be. They finished the repair, the new posts holding firm against the slope. As they mounted to ride back, Odessa turned her mare west instead of east. There's something I want to show you. He followed without asking. They rode along the ridge until the hills opened into a small flat of wild prairie. A narrow stream trickled through the center, bordered by cottonwoods. Odessa dismounted and walked to the edge of the water. Dempsey joined her, the grass brushing his knees. I found this place a week ago, she said. I was looking for a good spot to bring calves once they're weaned. He crouched, letting the grass sift through his fingers. It's good land, clean water, shelter. I thought maybe, she said, we could build the new room here, start fresh. Not just an addition, something that's ours from the first nail. Dempsey didn't speak, just stood and reached for her hand. She let him take it, her fingers curling around his. You sure? I wouldn't have shown you if I wasn't. The light shifted as the sun dropped behind the ridge, turning the tall grass gold. Odessa leaned into him, resting her head against his arm. You ever think about what you'd say to your younger self? She asked. He gave a quiet laugh. Maybe something like, don't waste so many years waiting for peace to come find you. Go build it yourself. She looked up at him. Think he'd listen? Not back then, but maybe now. They stood together in the hush of the falling light, the creek running behind them, the wind warm against their skin. Odessa bent to pick a sprig of yarrow and tucked it behind her ear. "I never thought I'd find something that felt this steady," she said. "Not after everything." Dempsey's hand was gentle at the small of her back. "You didn't find it. You made it." She turned toward him then, and he kissed her like the world wasn't watching, like he'd been waiting his whole life just to be still in that moment. When they rode back to the cabin, the stars had already begun to scatter across the sky. The porch lantern burned low, casting long shadows across the yard. Inside, the bed waited, but neither of them rushed. As they unsaddled the horses, Odessa's voice was soft in the dark. "I want to marry you." He looked at her, slow and quiet. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. This time, I'll walk down the aisle barefoot if I have to." Dempsey stepped close, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Then I'll build the altar myself. And every step after, we walk together." They didn't need a church bell or a crowd. The promise was made. And this time, it would hold. They married in early September beneath the cottonwood Odessa had first leaned against when she showed Dempsey the new clearing. It was a quiet ceremony, just the two of them with a pair of witnesses from the neighboring ranch, an older couple who brought a jar of canned peaches as a gift and left before the sun dipped low. Odessa wore a dress she'd sewn from a bolt of calico Dempsey had picked up from the trading post, and he shaved for the first time in weeks. The breeze was warm, the air full of dry grass and river scent, and when Dempsey said the words, his voice didn't waver. Afterward, Odessa walked with her hand in his, their boots sinking a little into the soft earth. Neither of them spoke much that evening. They didn't need to. The quiet pulsed between them like a steady rhythm, something whole and shared. By late autumn, the new addition was halfway framed. Dempsey had carved the beams from a stand of deadfall higher up the ridge, and Odessa had helped to notch the corners. Her confidence with tools had grown, though her thumb bore the dark crescent of a recent mistake. She didn't hide it, just wrapped it in clean cloth and kept going. "You've a mind for angles," Dempsey said, studying the way she measured the floor joists. "I like knowing how things fit together," she said. "It makes me feel like I'm part of something solid." He watched her for a moment, then said, "You've made this place clearer, like it was waiting for you to finish it." She looked up. "I think it was." They spent the cooler nights inside, Odessa's stitching basket tucked beneath the cot and Dempsey's books stacked near the hearth. The pistol they'd unearthed in summer was now displayed on the mantel, kept unloaded, a weight of history neither of them ignored, but neither carried. One evening, while Dempsey sharpened the draw knife, Odessa set down her mending and leaned against the doorframe. "I got a letter," she said. He looked over. "From Stillwater? My aunt. She's back from Oregon. Says my father sold the house and left for St. Louis. No one's seen him in weeks." Dempsey waited. "She says Winton married some banker's daughter 3 counties over. Guess he found someone more willing." "You all right?" "Yes," she said, folding her arms. "I kept thinking that part of my life might find its way here, that it might try to take something." He stood and crossed to her. "It didn't." "No," she agreed. "It didn't." By winter, the cabin had doubled. The new room had a window facing the creek, just as Odessa imagined. She'd sewn blue curtains from scraps, and Dempsey had carved a headboard with a pine bough design. Snow came early, blanketing the pasture and freezing the troughs by dawn. They stacked firewood high and salted meat in the shed. One morning, Odessa paused by the stove, her hand resting low on her belly. Dempsey was at the table mending a broken clasp on his saddlebag. She didn't speak right away, just watched the steam rise from the kettle. "I think we'll need to build a cradle," she said. Dempsey looked up, his brow furrowing just before it softened. "You sure?" She nodded, eyes bright. "I've known for a few days. I just wanted to be certain." He stood slowly, crossing to her. "You nervous?" "A little, but not afraid." His hands settled on her waist, warm and steady. "Then we'll build it together." The months passed in slow, even turns. Odessa grew rounder, her movements more deliberate. Dempsey took on more of the outside work, but she still met him at the fence line most mornings, wrapped in her wool shawl, hands tucked into his mittens. They spoke often now of the child, what it might be named, how to shape the days around its needs. They didn't speak of the past anymore. Not because it had vanished, but because it no longer ruled them. One night in late spring, as the cottonwoods budded and the creek ran high again, Odessa went into labor. The sky outside was full of rain and the wind pressed hard against the shutters. Dempsey boiled water, kept the fire fed, and held her hand through every hour. When the child came, it was just past dawn, the light pale and clean. "A girl," he whispered, voice thick. Odessa, exhausted and damp with sweat, smiled faintly. "She has your eyes." They named her Clara, after Dempsey's mother. She was a quiet baby, alert and strong, and she took her first steps the following spring in the field where they'd married. Years passed, marked by small things, harvests, storms, new tools traded for at the post. Odessa taught Clara to read from Dempsey's books, while he taught her to track deer prints through soft mud. The cabin never felt crowded, felt full. One summer evening, Odessa stood at the edge of their field, watching the wind move through the grass. Dempsey came up behind her, resting his hand lightly on her back. "She's growing fast," he said. Odessa nodded. "So are we." He looked at her, smile slow and sure. "Do you ever miss the life before?" "No," she said, leaning into him. "I only carry it with me. But it doesn't carry me." They stood like that for a long time, the light turning amber across the land they'd built together. The air smelled of soil and river and something sweet blooming nearby. They didn't speak of endings because there weren't any. Only the steady unfolding of days, each one earned, each one shared. And in the quiet heart of Montana, where the hills held their shadows and the creek ran without hurry, Dempsey and Odessa lived the rest of their years in peace, as they'd promised, side by side, with nothing left to escape.